Well, joining us for this Stanley Cup final panel is Evan Kenny, of course. And Evan, we are on the brink of possibly seeing the Tampa Bay Lightning sweep the Montreal Canadiens. Last time we did see that was in 1997-98 season when the Washington Capitals took on the Detroit Red Wings. There were a lot of similarities with those two series because, they look like, it looks like a mirrored image almost in a sense of what we're seeing now with the Montreal Canadiens and Tampa Bay. Now with Montreal, of course, being down 3-0, they were, of course, down 3-1 with Toronto. What are some keys for them if they want to get back in this series?
Yeah, Connor, you're 100% right with that reference, between the Detroit Red Wings and the Washington Capitals there. I mean, even just down to the fact, not only did Detroit sweep, but just the way these teams are set up is very similar. That Detroit team is a lot like the Tampa Bay team that we're seeing right now. Steve Yzerman, he had a little bit of a down regular season that season, but he came back and he put up 24 points in the playoffs, winning the Conn Smythe, and that was the most points he ever put up in the playoffs. So that's similar to what we're seeing here with Nikita Kucherov. Obviously a down season, not playing due to injury, but now coming back and being on an absolute tear throughout these playoffs. But it goes even deeper than that, Connor. Looking at some of Detroit's more depth-type players, some of the kind of physical type guys that they had, the Maltbys, the McCartys of those teams, they're similar to, Patrick Maroon or Barclay Goodrow in the sense that they're great guys, but they definitely add to your score sheet. Now looking at it, going even deeper to these similarities, the Washington Capitals team back then, they were an older team. They brought in a lot of guys at that trade deadline. Brian Bellows was one guy they added, Esa Tikkanen, some guys who had winning experience. Similar to Montreal, bringing in Corey Perry and Eric Stahl. But then, their core depth was still quite young. Sergei Gonchar was just getting into things. And while Sergei Gonchar played a bigger role than a guy like, say, Alex Romanov, there are certain characteristics there, that are similar. Now, Connor, getting to your point, what can Montreal do to keep this series, not just, win this series, but keep this series alive? They have to believe that they are still in this series. There was an interview with Justin Williams, and he said just that. The LA Kings, back when they won the first time, they didn't go through many, challenges. But that second time, at one point, they were down 3-0, and all they did was believe that they can do this, take it one game at a time, because you never know what's going to happen next. Now, Montreal's obviously looking for a reverse sweep. They're looking to be just the 5th team in history to do this and just the 2nd team to do it in the Stanley Cup Finals. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy by any means. You can just ask the 1942 Toronto Maple Leafs. But if they do want to do this, they have to believe that they are a team that can compete for this spot.
And you mentioned with the Detroit being similar to Tampa, of course, there wasn't really a huge salary cap, so of course they could have whoever they want there. If Tampa, in my view with Tampa Bay, if Tampa is going to win, the one thing, of course, they need to do is not underestimate Montreal, because we've seen what Montreal can do. They took down Vegas, they took down Toronto. They're obviously a very good team. We've seen that before, but Tampa just has that depth that you mentioned. They got those guys like Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow. Matthew Joseph had a really good game. Tyler Joseph had a really good game 3, and that's going to be key for if they are going to want to win and sweep and potentially sweep the Montreal Canadiens. But of course, if they have to go home for Tampa for Game 5, then I'm sure they're very capable of doing that. Of course, you can't forget Andrei Vasilevsky has been really good when it comes to series clinchers so far this year. He's been having shutouts, at least 2 of them, so he'll be probably a very deadly force for Tampa Bay if they want to close out this series. And one of the last things, Evan, I know, of course, if it does happen that they do get swept, and since we're also in the Stanley Cup Final and close to the end of the NHL season, we can't not talk about Conn Smythe favorites from each team here. For me, for Tampa Bay, I could see it being Nikita Kucherov again, but Andrei Vasilevsky has been really, really good for Tampa Bay. But it's all of a matter of who's going to step up more. It's going to be one of those two, in my opinion. And if you had to pick someone, Evan, just from either team, really, who would you have on your radar?
Connor, looking at my notes, you said 2 of the 3 guys that I have on here. I mean, Kucherov, like I said before, going on an absolute tear. We thought he did great in last playoffs. Well, in less games right now, he has almost as many points. So just a phenomenal player there. And then, like you said, Andrei Vasilevsky. I mean, when the games have mattered the most, those series clinching games, like you said, 2 shutouts there. So if he can continue with that kind of success, moving forward here, possibly Game 4, possibly Game 5 going forward, then I think, both of those guys are great front runners. And then obviously we have to give a nod to one Montreal Canadian. I mean, Carey Price, where would the Montreal Canadiens be in these playoffs without him? Connor, I don't know if I'd go as far to say, this is a potential J.S. Jaguar type scenario when he won the Conn Smythe, even though the Anaheim Ducks lost to the New Jersey Devils in the finals that one year. I don't know if it's quite that same situation, but if there were to be a guy from the Montreal Canadiens with them potentially losing to win this, I think Carey Price would definitely be their MVP.
If you're looking at a potential if they do lose and they do give a Conn Smythe to one of the Canadians, another dark horse in my mind there is Nick Suzuki. Evan Kenny, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Connor.